Today's video is the latest installment in our Gotei 13 series, where each month we take a look at one of the individual divisions that helps to make up the entirety of the Gotei 13, which is Soul Society's primary military might. And generally speaking, with these videos, we tend to do an in-depth overview of the division. We look at some of the most prominent characters within its ranks, and we also look at the division's overarching role within the wider Bleach story. As it's now the 5th month of the year, May, it's finally time to take a look at the 5th division and the former home of my favourite character in the series, Sosuke Aizen. Before we get started on that video, guys, if you haven't hit subscribe yet, make sure to do that now for more Bleach content like this every single week. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, as well, as it does help support me and the channel, as it just means that we'll get more traction on the whole YouTube algorithm, and it means that hopefully more Bleach fans like yourselves will get a chance to see the video. And if you really like what I do here and you want to take that support for me another step further, I do have a Patreon for my channel as well. Now, of course, you don't have to support me over there, but if you did decide to, you can get videos like this one early, and you can support me for as little as $1 a month. Everyone who is supporting me on Patreon is coming up on the screen right now. They're all patrons of the channel, and as always, I want to give you guys a massive, everlasting shout out. Thank you so much for supporting me and helping me do what I love. If I were to associate something with the 5th division, I would associate it perhaps most with the idea of change, of transition. It feels like the 5th division goes through an awful lot throughout the course of the story, but it wasn't always that way. When the Soul Society arc begins, we as readers get to have our first impressions of the Gotei 13. We're introduced to this concept of the Gotei 13 and the captains and vice-captains that make up the heads of each division. And of course, Kubo, being the author, has the ability to cultivate whatever our first impression of each division will be. And from my own experience back in the day when I was first reading and watching Bleach, my first impression of the 5th division was that they were kind of plain, unassuming, maybe even a little boring. But of course, that's exactly what Kubo wanted us to think. And it's not hard to see why. When you look at just the characters involved, for instance, you have the vice-captain, Hinamori Momo, a young, timid, almost slightly naive child who's, the pinnacle, really, of innocence within the Soul Society. And then you have her captain, who, when you place Aizen next to other more outlandish designs like Kyoraku Shunsui, Kenpachi Zaraki, and Mayuri Kurotsuchi, it's not easy for him to stand out. The whole division is supposed to be unassuming, and that's the entire point behind the 5th division at the start of the series. But of course, we know that the 5th division is hiding the greatest secret of all, that actually its captain is a Machiavellian supervillain, essentially, bent on taking out the king of Soul Society. And that's where, the major draw for the 5th division really lies. They're a weird division. They really are, because in my opinion, other than the fact that the captain turns out to be the main villain of the series, there's very little to really make them stand out. And I think that is done purposefully. That's what clearly they are supposed to be, like I said, the division that never really catches your eye. And that's, clearly done on purpose on Kubo's part. And yet, the division is also fascinating, because thanks to Aizen's many machinations throughout the past and the present of Bleach history, many well-known characters have been a part of the 5th division, perhaps more so than any other division within the Gotei 13, making it a sort of crossroads division, a melting pot division where numerous destinies have collided over time thanks to Aizen's scheming, and that's really cool as well. Now, as for the division itself, for an overview of this division, they don't really have any special duties assigned to them whatsoever, but they are well known for having a gentle, warm atmosphere. But perhaps more importantly, the 5th division is somewhere you go if you really want to excel, and they are well known for basically building up experts in certain fields, and we can see this with the vice-captain Hinamori. She is a Kido master at even such a young age, and basically many of the Shinigami, so many of them looked up to and loved Aizen. He was a very, very popular man when he was still a captain, and he was kind of seen as being this incredibly wise but also incredibly powerful leader. Many people kind of knew that he had mastered many of the Shinigami arts, and if you wanted to do the same, you went and studied under his tutelage, essentially. If you wanted to become both wise and powerful, you would go to Division 5. So it's kind of cool when you look at the evidence, you look at characters like Hinamori, and you see that the 5th Division is known for raising up specialists, really helping people with a talent get a chance to harness and use that talent for the betterment of Soul Society. While he was still a captain, Aizen also used to hold a monthly calligraphy class for all the members of the division, which is really quite a nice thing to, you kind of imagine him doing that. And Aizen is exactly the kind of person who, although he was, you know, villainous at heart, up to really no good and mostly out for his own agenda, the idea of him teaching a calligraphy class, you can really imagine him actually wanting to impart knowledge on the Shinigami, even if he wasn't really aligned with them at all. I can imagine him considering it a valuable skill for them to take away with them, and apparently the course was incredibly popular and they were, you know, incredibly unhappy with his sudden disappearance. And that goes back to this idea of almost like a cult of personality Aizen had created for himself, where people just absolutely loved this guy. And I feel like you even get to see a bit of that in the manga itself, in Turn Back the Pendulum. You know, that arc, that mini arc, opens with Aizen, you know, greeting all these people in the morning. Everybody seems to absolutely love this guy. And I think that's supposed to be the vibe that the 5th Division gave off before the tragedy of Aizen's betrayal. The division's motto is sacrifice, danger, pure love, humility, sweetness. And this is also what is embodied by their insignia, the Lily of the Valley. And I really like this. Again, this is really cool. It kind of gives off the idea of this very well-rounded, multifaceted division that seems to kind of just be like the all-rounder division, which again kind of feeds into that idea of them not really having anything that truly makes them stand out, but they're very good at almost everything they do. And the Lily of the Valley is a really cool flower for them to have as their insignia as well, as I think it's fairly obvious what it represents, but it's pretty cool nonetheless. So the Lily of the Valley is this really beautiful flower, but it's also incredibly deadly, poisonous, basically for humans and animals. And to me, that is, I would argue, very emblematic of Aizen and his true nature. You know, this incredibly lovely, well-liked, almost revered Shinigami captain who, at his core, is poisonous to the rest of the Shinigami. He doesn't care about them. He is, you know, evil at heart, essentially. And that really, I think, comes across in this insignia. I think that's really, really cool. And Kubo does this a lot with Aizen, this idea of someone who is on the outside, forward-facing, just lovely, almost perfect, really, in every way. You know, he's well-liked by absolutely everybody and seems to give off this air of being very nice and very caring. But once you kind of dive deep into the dark heart of this Shinigami, he's a cruel, manipulative person who's out for his own gain. And I think that's really, really cool. And like I said, Kubo has a running theme with Aizen. My absolute favourite quote. Honestly, I think this sort of thing is just pure genius. And this is maybe more suited to an Aizen video, but I want to bring it up here because I think it's got the same kind of connotations as having the Lily of the Valley as their insignia. The way Kubo describes Aizen, so basically he did this thing, I can't remember where it originates from, maybe it's from one of the original data books, but basically he had like a single line to describe each captain. And his line for Aizen was, the gaze into the sun. And I think that is just so clever. Like, talk about understanding your characters so very well. I mean, that is so wonderful. That's so cool. The sun is this, like, heavenly body. It's beautiful to behold. It's glorious, incandescent, shining down upon people. But you are not supposed to look straight at it. Because if you do, you know, you could hurt yourself. It's bad for you to do that. And I love that because it's like this idea of like Aizen being this wonderful being lifted up by everyone, but if you look too closely, you'll see something that you don't want to see because you'll get hurt. And I think that's just so smart. It's so clever. But linking it back to this video, it's very similar to this idea of the Lily of the Valley, this beautiful, sweet-scented flower, but it is deadly poisonous, and I think that is really cool. But I think the Lily of the Valley may also refer to another captain of the 5th Division as well. Doing a bit of research about the flower, it turns out that its sweet scent is incredibly popular within the perfume industry. Apparently this smell is absolutely lovely. And it just so happens that one of the captains of the 5th Division has a Zanpakuto that invokes a very sweet smell, of course being Shinji Hirako with his Zanpakuto Sakanare. When he activates his Shikai, what triggers the effect in the opponent is this kind of almost like, in the anime, I think it's showcased as being like a sort of pungent, almost opulent purple smoke that has a really nice smell to it, but once you've smelled it, you fall under its spell. And that seems to be a direct reference to Shinji as well regarding the insignia of their division. But really, I think what's cool about the Lily of the Valley is while some of its darker connotations might work directly with Aizen, really just the general idea of this flower that is from a distance sophisticated and beautiful to behold, but deadly up close could really apply to any of them. You know, you see Momo, you maybe don't think from afar she's the most dangerous person ever, but she's very, very, very skilled in Kido. When she puts her mind to it, she is combat proficient, and I think that really the flower kind of is emblematic of all of them. If you get too close to these people, they can be dangerous. Now, the division's official colour is pale turquoise, and turquoise apparently is symbolic of a number of different things. Like, it symbolises a lot of different things, but what I really took away from it the most is that it symbolises clarity, but it has a mysterious side to it as well. And I think this colour really showcases the duality that you find at the centre of the 5th Division. Apparently it has both favourable and questionable qualities as well, which I think suits the division down to the ground. Supposedly the colour can mean balance, calmness, and clarity, which again I think are things you can really kind of attribute to most members of the 5th Division, but I feel like Aizen is really the one who you're supposed to look at here. He comes across as a very calm individual, a very balanced individual, but on the flip side of this colour, it can also mean narcissism and secrecy, which again just literally speaks volumes about Aizen's character. And I think I love the idea of clarity as well, kind of coming out. We as readers, but also everyone else in the division, has sudden clarity when Aizen's true motives are revealed, and kind of the shroud of secrecy is removed from the 5th Division entirely. Now, if we look at the 5th Division's role in the wider Bleach storyline, it took me a while to really work out what the first chronological moment we see, the earliest point we see of the 5th Division in the story is. Most divisions tend to be turn back the pendulum, and I was immediately like, yeah, that must be the same for the 5th Division, but it's actually not. There is a moment much earlier in the story than that showcases the 5th Division at its earliest point, and that is when Komamura manages to pass the Shino Academy and joins the Gotei 13. Here he meets up with his old friend Kaname Tozen, who at this point is not a captain, not a vice captain. I'm not even sure if he's a seated officer. I would presume maybe not. But he says to Komamura, "Oh, I'm so glad you finally made it. I should introduce you to my own division. We have a wonderful captain. I think you would really like it there." And we then get to see Komamura meeting Aizen, and Aizen's like, "Oh, Tosen told me about you. I'm Sosuke Aizen, the vice captain of the 5th Division." So basically, at this point in the storyline, Tosen is a part of the 5th Division, which means this is around the time Shinji is still captain, because when Turn Back the Pendulum takes place, Tosen has already moved to the 9th Division, where he would stay forever after. So this is really quite early on, and to be honest, I don't think it ever really clocked with me that Komamura was around during Turn Back the Pendulum. He just doesn't have any role to play in that storyline. But then after that, of course, about 110 years prior to the main storyline, we do have Turn Back the Pendulum. We get to see what the 5th Division looked like back here. The captain is Shinji Hirako, his vice captain is Sosuke Aizen, and that is just such an awesome pairing. I love that. I think that's so cool. It's almost like they're always trying to suss each other out. And I think Shinji really kind of evolved as a character thanks to his involvement in Turn Back the Pendulum, maybe more so than really anyone else. I think maybe characters like Kisuke, I guess, but Shinji just kind of was transformed to being someone who was very close, I think, to being on Aizen's level in many different ways. And I just love seeing the way they seem amicable, but there's also that complete air of mistrust among the two of them at all times, which must have been kind of toxic for the 5th Division overall. I love that point where Shinji is having a really kind of heart-to-heart conversation with Kisuke, as Kisuke is a brand new captain. And as he's walking away, Shinji realises that Aizen has been spying on them this entire time, presumably using the Kido spell Kyoko, as he just kind of breaks the sky where Aizen is, and he's like, how long are you going to stand there watching? And Aizen's like, how long did you know I was here? And Shinji's like, ever since you were in your mother's womb, which is kind of his saying in that arc. And that's such a good moment, because it just shows that Shinji doesn't trust Aizen, but he kind of lets him do his own thing at this point, and Aizen is obviously, clearly up to no good. Like, I don't understand how any vice captain could really think they could get away with just kind of eavesdropping in such a sinister manner on what should just be two captains having a friendly chat. And I just want to point out very briefly as well, I love that panel, that tiny panel on that page of Aizen's like nose, and then the frames of his glasses, and you can't see his eyes at all. Kubo is so good with the subtleties like that. Aizen looks so sinister in that shot, because because we as readers know that he's evil, and obviously Shinji is kind of not really trusting him at all, but he doesn't know he's a total bad guy yet. But I just love that little shot. But this is really cool. It's nice to get this kind of gaze into the 5th Division this early on. They don't really do an awful lot, like Shinji just plays the kind of similar role to the rest of the Vizards in this arc, but of course, Aizen being revealed as the perpetrator behind the holification experiments would change the 5th Division forever. And this is what I mean by it feels like they go through so much, like Shinji is betrayed by his vice captain, who turns out to be the ringleader of everything kind of evil that's happening in the Soul Society at the moment, and Aizen would carry on these kind of inhumane experiments right the way through, pretty much until he is no longer a captain. Now, Shinji and Aizen have a fascinating relationship as far as captain and vice captain go, in that it's really unlike any we've ever seen before or would ever see again, in that the captain is constantly distrusting, suspicious of his right-hand man, and his right-hand man is in turn essentially using his captain to further his own gain. And much later on, well, when Aizen is revealed to be the villain and Shinji is, about to be holified further, they basically have this conversation where they kind of reveal almost each other's motives for working with the other one, and Shinji claims that he knew all along that Aizen was up to no good, that Aizen couldn't be trusted, and crucially, that he was dangerous, which is why he chose him to be his vice captain. First off, I just want to say that's intriguing in itself, because does that mean Aizen, his villainy was well known by some people? Did some Shinigami have more of an idea that he was always up to no good than others? If not, did Shinji not choose to share this information, or was it merely suspicion on his part? In which case, why was he suspicious? Because as Aizen is well known for meticulously planning out virtually everything he does and has avoided detection for over 100 years, so what is it about Shinji that allowed him to be suspicious of Aizen in the first place? And also, has Aizen's evil ways, has he been doing this since way before he was even a vice captain? As he notes that, when he was chosen to be Shinji's vice captain, he could have turned it down, but Shinji was kind of the ideal candidate for him as he moved up the ranks. So I think that is a really kind of, that's super interesting to me, and I would love to do a video on the relationship between these two characters in and of itself, because I think it is, like I said, truly like nothing else, no other duo we get to see in the series. And this idea of Shinji, although he is Aizen's superior, Aizen feels superior to him, particularly in this scene where it's like he has won, and he has got one up over his captain. Makes for some really fascinating character reading for me, and I really do like how Kubo chose to portray these guys as, on the surface, like I said, sort of working together, but crucially attempting to almost undermine each other all along. And of course, the big revelation that Aizen was, for the last month, not actually with Shinji at all, and Shinji didn't notice it, is a really nice twist, and it feels like it hits home quite hard, because Shinji has really lost control of his division at that point. If even his lieutenant is able to do whatever he likes without Shinji having the faintest idea that he's even gone, that's how Aizen's conducting his experiments. That's how he's inducting people like Gin Ichimaru into his fold without Shinji having the faintest idea. That's pretty cold. And that whole scene about, treachery, the transparent treachery is nothing to be feared, but treachery that you cannot detect is what's truly frightening. is really, really intriguing to me, and I just think that this duo is done really well, and I love that it serves for the foundation of their entire relationship moving forwards. We do get to see one other member of their division during Turn Back the Pendulum, and that's another really cool moment, where basically Kaien and Ukitake are discussing this new prodigy within the Gotei 13, and Kaien's like pondering, oh, which division managed to get this kid? And Ukitake reveals it was the 5th, and so you can imagine Aizen kind of scooped up this guy, who of course is revealed to be Gin Ichimaru, and it's actually difficult to kind of guess. I'm maybe thinking about it right now, maybe Gin tried to actively choose to be in that division to get as close to Aizen as possible, but there's a really cool moment where you first are introduced to him. Gin has murdered the 5th Division's 3rd seat. That's a really cool moment as well. But this next part in the timeline is really what I'm talking about when I say that this is a crossroads division. We get to see Aizen is now the captain, his vice captain is Gin Ichimaru, and they save a couple of academy students from these massive hollows, which are Aizen's own experiments. But they see potential, or Aizen sees potential, in the students Momo, Izuru, and Renji, and all 3 of them end up in the 5th Division. Renji is eventually the first one to be transferred away because he's too rebellious, he's too much trouble, and Aizen thinks perhaps he can't manipulate him that easily. But Izuru is eventually, of course, given to Gin in the 3rd Division. Basically, Aizen and Gin have been like controlling the destinies of particularly Izuru and Momo for years, like puppets on strings. And that's really great as well. And so it's really cool seeing the 5th Division kind of evolving over time like this. And because of Aizen's status as the main villain, we get to see different kind of moments of him throughout time during his tenure as a captain. He obviously goes to visit Baragon Luisenbahn in Waco Mundo while he's still the captain of the 5th Division. He's active in Everything But the Rain, and Gin has also become a captain at this point, so perhaps Hinamori is now Aizen's vice captain. It is only 20 years from the present day, so I think that's highly likely, but they are all still up to no good. And then we get to the present day timeline for the 5th Division, and of course, like I said, the 5th Division starts out feeling not all that special in the Soul Society arc, although Momo is quite a humanizing character for the Gotei 13 in general. She's a character, she actually plays a really big role in the Soul Society arc. I mentioned a few videos ago that there is definitely a hierarchy of vice captains who get kind of showcased in each arc, and Hinamori is one of them in the Soul Society arc, and her early exposure to the reader like this actually led to her being quite a popular character, I think, overall. But so basically, obviously, Aizen doesn't really do a lot in this arc to begin with. He just kind of gives off that affable, nice guy appearance, but there are a couple of hints that maybe he's figuring out a conspiracy in the background, and then, of course, he is brutally murdered like a flower on the precipice hanging from the wall. And Momo, completely breaks down. She loses it. She tries to discover the truth about Aizen's killer, and obviously, this arc is kind of brutal to the 5th Division because it tears it apart from the inside. Aizen's actions destroy much of what this division has. When it's revealed at the end of the Soul Society arc that he is in fact a villain, he nearly kills Hinamori after she's already been through so much. She's turned against her friends, Izuru and Hitsugaya, because of Aizen's poisonous words, and pushed to the very brink, she has now been nearly killed, and Aizen reveals his true intentions, his true schemes to ascend to the throne of Soul Society, the vacant throne, and he escapes for Waco Mundo, and that kind of leaves the 5th Division in absolute tatters at the end of the Soul Society arc, because although Gin and Tosen have escaped the Soul Society as well, their vice captains are, for the most part, capable of now at least taking over the interim of the division's captain duties. But Momo is literally left at the end of this arc in a hospital bed, and it leaves the 5th Division in a very precarious place. And so, because of the destructive way this division is handled in the Soul Society arc, the 5th Division does not do a lot during the Arrancar arc, because Momo is hospitalized for a large part of it seems like, and her mental state is not ready to deal with the reality of the situation going on. Aizen is waging war against the Soul Society, and you kind of feel like she's caught up in the middle. She's this young girl who adored Aizen, trusted him, maybe even loved him, And now she's kind of left in this shattered state. There's a pretty brutal scene where during the Urankar arc, she gets to see Hitsugaya again, but she breaks down. She kind of has a mental breakdown about them trying to maybe save Aizen from Gin, who she claims is the one pulling the strings. It's tough to see, but she does return for the fake Karakura Town fight. And, you spoke... Again, Kubo is really harsh to this character. I don't really know why. I don't know if maybe he doesn't really like her, or if it's this idea of Momo being the humanizing part of the Gotei 13. Maybe in many ways the metaphorical heart of the Gotei 13. Or it's even supposed to be Aizen's ties to being a regular Shinigami, which is why she has to be brutalized, because it's Aizen leaving that behind. But she comes back strong. She teams up with Rangiku to fight the Trey Beastias. You get a really cool moment where she ignites them with a massive Kido net, but then she's taken out by Ion. And she kind of spends the rest of the fake Karakura Town arc unconscious. She's kind of alive. She's all right. Her eyes are mostly open. But then, of course, you get the absolutely horrible scene, although it is an amazing Aizen scene, where he tricks the rest of the captains into nearly killing her. Using Kyoko Suigetsu, they all basically stab her. Hitsugaya runs her through. And so, even though Aizen is eventually defeated and imprisoned, the 5th Division is once again left in ruin, even worse than last time, perhaps. Hinamori has been once again nearly killed. And I think as brutal as it is because Aizen needs to leave behind this idea of his humanity, and that kind of is Hinamori to him. But it is tough to see, and the division really takes a serious beating, which in my opinion is why the division's kind of rebirth from the ashes a bit later on is so nice. The 5th Division doesn't do a lot during the Lost Agent arc, but you do get the very nice reveal that Shinji Hirako has once again taken up command of his old division and is now Momo's new captain. And that's really great. Now, in my opinion, I think that Shinji should have arrived at the battle with Execution, maybe instead of Hitsugaya. All of those characters who arrived in that fight have some kind of personal history with Ichigo. Even Ikaku's, which is a little bit tenuous, but he was Ichigo's first major battle in the Soul Society arc, so I can kind of get behind it. But Ichigo and Hitsugaya, they're not really that close. They don't really have that much going on, and I think Shinji being there instead would have been really powerful. Now, I think Kubo was probably decided not to do that because he wanted to save Shinji's reveal for when Ichigo returned to the Gotei, but it would have made more sense, and at least Shinji would have actually had a fight then. But it is really nice to see him taking back command of his old division. And we enter the 1,000-year Blood War arc, and this arc is kind of cursed for the Vizards, as we've talked about before, in that they really just don't really do anything, and that means that the 5th Division kind of gets saddled with that. However, there is something I want to talk about, and that is, of course, the resurgent prominence of the 5th Division. It's nice seeing this division finally in one place, free in many ways of Aizen's taint. And I think that is so cool. Both Shinji and Hinamori have been betrayed by this guy. He has ruined both of their lives, but together they get a chance to really rebuild that bond, and they can forge a new bond between themselves as well. And it's for that reason that I'm really grateful that we actually got to see a bit of their relationship. Kubo I remember Kubo saying that he wanted to draw the relationship between Shinji and Momo prior to the 1,000-year Blood War arc beginning, and we do get to see it. We get to see a bit of it, and it's really nice to see as well, because I think it shows that Momo in particular has come on leaps and bounds since her abuse at the hands of Aizen, and she's really taken to this new captain. I think she's become a lot more mature, she's not idolizing Shinji, she's not completely in love with him, but there is a mutual respect there, and it's a very healthy relationship, which I think is absolutely key, and that's really nice to see. You can see that I imagine Aizen pretty much means nothing to this girl anymore, just like to Shinji. I mean, Shinji obviously never really cared about Aizen anyway and was always kind of onto him, but I think Shinji has kind of taken her under his wing, and he's happy that they can both leave Aizen behind. And I've complained in the past that I thought it was really weird that both Shinji and Hinamori said absolutely nothing when Aizen was set free, and it's a bit of a shame that he interacts with them not at all. But at the same time, I kind of understand it. I can see that maybe that's supposed to be Kubo's way of showing that these characters have moved on, that they don't feel the need to say anything, but I don't know. I would have liked a little bit of something. But regardless, unfortunately, though, despite their great new relationship, despite seeing this kind of camaraderie building between them, because Shinji is a Vizard, they don't really get to do anything. And they basically spend the entire Thousand Year Blood War arc running around, not really doing anything, which is kind of weird. So in the first invasion, Sternritter are attacking every division. We don't even find out who is attacking the 5th division at all. And it's kind of strange because you sort of see Hinamori and Shinji running, but they are both injured, and at this time the Soldat haven't arrived, so they must have been fighting a Sternritter at some point. So either Shinji and Momo incapacitated their opponent, or they ran away from the fight, which I guess could be happening. Shinji even says something like, "Come on, Momo, we need to actually get involved in this," but he's beaten up, so I don't know who he's been fighting. Presumably they've been fighting somebody. Now, Shinji is handled strangely in this arc. Momo actually takes a major backseat again in this arc, but I don't really mind that. Like I said, I think she's had her moment to kind of be in the spotlight with the Soul Society arc. Her arc is mostly wrapped up now. Like, she's come out the other side of her abuse from Aizen, a totally new, much stronger girl than she was before, and that's really cool to see. And she's got to this new, nice place with her new captain. So it kind of makes sense that she's not really in it that much, but Kubo seems to, acknowledge that this guy was a major character. So Shinji is, around a lot. He actually, unlike Rose and Kensei, and certainly unlike the rest of the Vizards, he actually has a lot of screen time in this arc. He just doesn't do anything, and that's really weird. Later on, he approaches Bambietta and he gets wiped out immediately. There's a nice moment there, though, with Momo leaping to his defense. She, shouts, "Captain." You can see that she's pretty upset. Again, showing that they've obviously built a nice bond together. And actually, I just think I want to commend Kubo. I think the relationship between Shinji and Momo is a great example of showing, not telling. Because Kubo could have just had someone say, "Oh, Shinji and Momo, they have a great relationship now." In fact, he kind of does that with Rose and Kira. Those two are the only two we never get to see on screen together. And Rose just sort of says, "Oh, when Kira is injured, my guitar will cry and melodies will flow out," or something like that. And that is telling, not showing. We never get to see their relationship. But Shinji and Momo's is done really, really well. But basically, Shinji is knocked out by Bambietta, and later on, Momo kind of heals him, and there's a nice moment where they save Omaida from an attack of the Soldat, and I think that's a really good scene in general. But they basically all kind of move towards this Shinigami stronghold. They are then attacked by Bazby, and of course it happens off screen. I would have loved to have seen even just a 2-chapter fight between Shinji and Baz would have been awesome. We don't get to see it. Apparently Shinji just sort of saves them and they get away. And then of course they all go up to the Royal Palace. And then there's just absolutely ridiculous. They all go up to the Royal Palace, they all take on Gerard Valkyrie. Gerard sort of smashes Shinji and Momo. Momo goes flying, Shinji grabs her, and then Gerard just sort of takes him out. And apparently Momo is able to survive a Gerard hand slap, but Shinji is not, because Shinji is totally knocked out, and Momo is carrying him around. Momo must think he's a total liability at this point, but it's nice to see them regardless. And Momo is actually in the Thousand Year Blood War arc for, to the kind of end game stages. It's just a shame she doesn't really do anything. And I honestly, I say to this day that Shinji should have been involved in that fight with Gerard, but it doesn't matter now. But that's pretty much it for their kind of timeline at the end of the story and moving into the Hell chapter as well. We get to see that they are still in that healthy place. The 5th Division seems to be better than it has ever been before. And that's what I think is really cool about this division, is that a lot of divisions go through development and change, but the 5th Division, as I mentioned before, feels like it changes the most. It loses that poisonous taint, that toxicity of Aizen that was kind of hanging around it all this time. And it has now just become a nice place to be, I think, and that is really cool to see. And so, looking at the prominent characters of this division fairly quickly, like I said, there are quite a lot of characters who we know that have been in this division. Of course, Aizen, Shinji, and Momo are sort of the main trifecta. But then characters like Gin have been there, Renji, Izuru, Tosen, loads of characters have been in this Crossroads division, like I mentioned before. And that is really cool. That makes it, I think, definitely one of the more interesting divisions from a lore perspective. I think that's really neat. But of course, you know, Aizen, there's so much to say about this character, and we will do an Aizen video, a character sort of analysis at some point, but there is loads to say about, you know, Bleach's main villain, the schemes and the machinations he was running in the background while basically, like, ruining the 5th Division from the inside out. And then you've got Hinamori Momo, who has, you know, been messed around by Aizen to the point where she has nearly died twice, and it's like Aizen trying to cast aside his humanity by using Momo as like a shield almost. It's horrible stuff for her. And Shinji kind of having his life ruined 100 years ago, but managing to rise up from the ashes. And I think more than anything, Shinji's story feels like a real success story in that regard, because his vice captain was the one who caused everything. And Shinji had his life ruined, but now, in the present day, Shinji is the one back in his position as captain, with a vice captain that cares about him, a two-way relationship. Aizen is rotting in a jail cell. Things have ended up well for him and for the 5th Division. I think that's really emblematic in the way these characters end up. But that's basically it for our video on the 5th Division, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know in the comments below what your favourite 5th Division moment was from the story of Bleach, and who is your favourite character to have been a part of the division as well. Mine's pretty obvious, but let me know who yours is in the comments. I'd love to know. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done already, guys. Let's try and push to hit 130,000 subscribers. That would be absolutely insane. But until next time, I'll catch you later. And I'll see you then.